Hello, Daniel.
Hello, good day. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Daniel Halsey. I'm with United Designers, here also with Weruschca Kirkegaard, co-founder of United Designers. We are an international design team. We work in the United States, Europe, all around the world, the Mediterranean, and we design ecological systems and help people solve their problems with watersheds, ecological restoration, and we basically try to help people get their needs met all around the world. We work on large-scale ecosystem restoration, community-based watersheds. We've worked in Haiti, Lebanon, Senegal, across the world, and we enjoy working with different cultures and helping them create resources and really solve a lot of the problems that climate change is bringing to them, and also working through their cultures, helping them expand their resources. Weruschca Kirkegaard is a co-founder along with myself and our team of designers across the world. We have a very good time working together as a cooperative design team using all of our expertise as much as we can. And thank you for having us here.
Thank you, Daniel. Hi, Mark. Hi, everyone. Hi, Eli. Hi, Weruschca. Eli, the floor is yours. Please introduce us to the guest and tell us what we're doing. How many sessions did you have already, and what is the plan for the month?
Yes. Hi, Anthony. Hi, Daniel. Hi, Weruschca. Today we have our third episode, and we're going to be talking about vegetable garden needs. This is our third episode, like I mentioned before. We had two previous episodes. One, it was an introduction of permaculture, and the second was we were talking a little bit about the designs. And today, along with Mr. Daniel Halsey, we have Mrs. Weruschca from the Netherlands. Our guest is along with Daniel, the co-founder of United Designers, and she has a large expertise in communication, in aesthetics, in nutrition, and in health. And she will be using this experience to go along with our session today. So welcome, Daniel. Welcome, Mrs. Weruschca. And here we go.
Thank you for that. I'll share the screen. We're going to begin right away with talking about vegetable gardening. Hopefully our subtitles will work correctly in the bottom. We're hoping that will be helpful for people. And then Mark can also help translate on anything else that we might need or any comments that come in. Growing vegetables is a continuous process where each step in the process creates either more production or less. It's a cycle of growth and death in the natural systems. The harvest is just one stage of that natural system, that ecological cycle. And gardening is in itself using and growing plants and eating them as they grow or as they're ready to be harvested. Each stage needs attention. Some vegetables will take the entire season to grow, while others can be harvested as they grow or repeatedly. Some plants can even be planted because they grow so quickly, they can be planted many times during a season.
Yeah, so first, of course, we always start with the planning, the layout of your plot. The elements to consider of the site determine the possibilities at hand, but also serve to zone the area for the different growing systems. You have to consider wind, water, sun, soil, which will determine where what can grow and which systems function at their best. Think of sun-loving crops, shade-tolerant ones, shade needed for vermicompost, and so on. Then you move on to routing, which means how do you move around on the plot? So access to the different resources like water, compost are design drivers, but also the actual theme of the space is leading. Is the main focus culinary? Is it a communal picking garden, or is the main goal a high production garden? And then even more important, whether it's for commercial, educational, or private use. Do you want to create microclimates or raise the possibilities for a diverse crop? Observation is key before you start planting. Next slide, Dan. Other elements to consider, growing vegetables requires a certain number of tools and materials. So it's important to stay organized, to keep your tools and materials available, clean, and dry. Compost piles should be on site, as well as access to a toilet. Water storage and even a place to sit or keep your things are all important in the garden. Are you introducing small animal systems? Then their placement is also essential for happy and healthy animals. Ducks, for instance, are incredible at eating snails and slugs. So you want them close to your vegetable patches, but also where they have access to some water and shelter.
How's that going, Mark and Anthony? Are we doing well? Do you need any kind of
well, we will translate a little bit quickly before we move to rotation. So very quickly حكينا دانيال وفيروشكا هلا كانوا عم بيفسروا لنا عن حاجات حيلا اذا بدكم جنينه صغيره. فباختصار هو اذا بتنتبهوا عم تنكتب شويه ترجمه تحت. الفكره منها انه قد ما فينا نجرب نطلع على الطبيعه، يعني كثير هيك نطلع عليها observation، نجرب اذا بدكم نفهم انه الجنينه المنيحه بدها نطلع على الهواء وين، الشمس وين، المي وين، وشو هن حاجات الزراعات. يعني ما رح نفوت هلا كثير بالتفاصيل لانه هلا رح اترجم لكم بعدين لما يفوتوا فيهم. هلا بدهم يبلشوا يفسروا لنا كيف نعمل مثل روتيشن او رزنامه زراعيه، شو نزرع بالاول وكل سنه وكيف نغير. You can go on.
Okay, thank you. So one of the things we want to keep in mind is that plants compete for nutrients, for water, and for space in the soil. So in that sense, we need to make sure that we are giving them space to grow, but also rotating the crops since many of them have different effects on the soil. That's what we call crop rotation. You can do that by an annual basis each year through the different beds as you move around in the different plots of your garden, planting different things. This helps break up the soil, the texture, it helps replace nutrients, and it also makes sure that you're not extracting nutrients that are important to a certain crop each year. If you do a monocrop and you grow the same plant every year in the same spot, you're all of a sudden going to run out of some specific nutrient that's needed for that plant that basically other plants might supply or don't need themselves. That's why we rotate through. There's a couple different ways of doing this. Rotating the crops by seasons. And this is what I mean by planting beds. So you have basically things divided up in your garden space to do that. And if you're not looking for huge amounts of production, you can interplant also. But if you need to really control and have a good harvest of any one thing, it's good to basically do planting beds where you have very few crops to make it easier to harvest that way. Now, one of the things I have also in here is a little chicken, because livestock can also be part of this rotation, where during the season or after the season, you have the livestock go in and actually help clean up the garden, manure it, scratch it, eat the pests. Chickens are very good. Ducks also do this in some of the systems. And it's nice to have the animals. They basically create a cleaning mechanism for our garden spaces. Rotations can also happen in rows, changing with each planting. In this sense, you don't really have to change the shape or move around. You're just moving over the plants a couple feet to a different row each year. So they basically are rotating spatially. With these rows, the soil stays focused in a row and the manure is added to those rows each year. The paths in the garden don't change. That soil gets rather compressed and compacted. So you're adding manure and you're adding fertilizer to these rows and changing the plants to grow in those each year to continue a good harvest. Division among these groups, of course, is done by the different types of plants that you're putting in. Some plants grow together well and others don't. So mainly do this for nutritional needs, fertilizing the vegetables on an individual basis. So as you can see in the plots here in the lower right corner, you might change what kind of fertilizer, manure, or frequency of fertilizer you're doing in here depending upon what the plants are. This also helps you avoid disease. Many times if the same plant is grown in the same place, disease grows in the soil and after a while overtakes the plants. That's again another reason that we rotate through this.
Let's translate a little bit, Daniel. بعدين أنطوني ما بعرف إذا بدك تقول شيء. أنا رح ترجم على السريع لأنه الأفكار يلي هلا قالهم هن تقريبا أهم أفكار بدنا نحكيهم اليوم. هو ليه نحن بنعمل مثل رزنامة زراعية أو مزرعة كل سنة شغلة. أول شيء لأنه النباتات هن بيعملوا مثل كومبيتيشن بين بعضهم، فبدنا نعرف شو نزرع وين نزرع. مش كثير مهم نعمل دورة زراعية يلي هو نغير المطرح اللي بنزرع فيه النبتة. فينا قال كل سنة وفينا مش كل سنة. أهم شيء ننتبه قدام بعد النباتات من بعضهم وهيك. ورجع فسر عن شغلة كتير مهمة إنه إذا زرعنا افترضوا هالسنة شغلة هون نرجع نغير. ورجع حكى عن فكرة بركي للبنان ما بتزبط من المكان بس مهمة ونعملها أكثر وأكثر، هو نحط الحيوانات بارت أوف إذا بدكم من الروتيشن اللي عم نعملها. حكى عن الدجاج وحكى عن البط، وقال انه اوقات فينا نفوتهم للحيوانات وقت نكون عم نريح ارض لننظفها، هيدا شغله كثير مهمه. وحكى انه عن الرزنامه فيها تكون مقسمه جغرافيا بكذا طريقه، فيها تكون مثل ما فرجها بالصور زياحه بعضهم او لا. بالاخر شو المهام تبع هالرزنامه اللي عم يحكي عنها؟ اولا بنخفف استعمال الكيماويات وفينا نقرر اي ارض نعطيها اكثر سماد اذا بدكم. فينا كمان نخفف من الامراض لانه كل ما النبته بتزرع ذات المطرح كل سنه تكثر الامراض. ورجع حكي عن شغله كثير مهمه كمان يلي هي كيف نحسن التربه وتصير التربه اضبط. If you want you can go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, I'll take you to the growing calendar. Developing your own planting calendar is extremely useful. We personally prefer to use an Excel spreadsheet, as you can work on it with more people gathering data throughout the seasons. It gives you a guide for planting and harvesting, but also when to pre-sow and when you have an empty bed for an exchange of crops. Many of these are available as an app on your phones or online as a garden service or a design service from websites. But we do believe that making your own is much more valuable in the end. Each year, frost or rain dates or actual planting dates may change. So it's good to have a chart that you can adapt with everyone involved. Companion planting is another way for allowing to fill the garden space more efficiently. Sharing the soil with different types of roots and also keeping the soil covered and moist. You can mix and match the companion plants using whatever you're planning to grow and building your own companion groups. A few examples, for instance, are tomatoes. They repel cabbage caterpillars. You have alliums that repel almost all pests, including carrot flies. Radishes attract leaf miners away from spinach, and many herbs confuse many pests in general, and so on.
Thanks, Weruschca. Let's look at some of the plant families as we're planting. Now, we're talking about companion planting and things growing together. Many of these vegetables that we're growing are actually very similar. As far as the brassica family, we have kohlrabi, kale, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower. These are all from the same plant family. And so they might also benefit from the same companion plants. Brassicas are a family of plants. Generally, they take 60 to 90 days to grow. This is an excellent opportunity to surround the plants with other companion plants that might grow more slowly, so are used as ground cover. It's good to keep in mind that some companion plants might be perennials, such as chamomile, hyssop, lavender, thyme listed here, and even sage. So we can plant perennial plants in here that are growing constantly and then interplant those things that grow more quickly. And then we have other things that grow more slowly, such as these here that we're showing with the brassica family. Then we have the onions. Depending on your culinary needs, onions have a very good selection of shape and many sizes for many uses. Onion bulbs are also easily stored for a long-term period. That's another thing that we want to think about as we're growing plants is what can we grow a lot of and then store for a long period of time. Leeks and chives, the tops of onions, are also a very high value crop. I personally know a lot of farmers in different countries that grow leeks and they grow onions because they're the lightest to carry and they have one of the highest value per pound or per kilo in order for them to make an income. Then we have the beans. The legumes are the beans of our vegetable family. Some of these beans grow on trellises as vines, others are a bush type. Most all of them are nitrogen fixers. These we have in our rotation to build the soil back and put nitrogen back in the soil. Peanuts grow underground, whereas green beans grow above the ground. Pulses, these are called pulses, are the seeds of the plants and typically need to be shelled. I thought this was a great example of a rooftop garden from one of a person in Lebanon. Working on the rooftop garden, you can see how the surfaces are used to grow the food. Many types of containers, anything you can find to hold the soil. Buckets, crates, bins, wooden boxes, all can be used for planters. The roofs of buildings probably have the most sun of anywhere in the city. It is probably the most secure, though requiring a fair amount of effort to assemble. This is one example also of using large pots. These pots are old wine casks filled with soil, and you can see basil, peppers, and tomatoes growing in these areas, plus a little cage around them to tie the tomatoes to at the same time. If you're doing raised beds like this, you will need to change the soil as a seasonal basis. After each harvest, once it's done, you empty these containers into a pile of compost and replace it or mix it in order to reduce any kind of disease. On the right, we have some examples of some nutrients, potassium and phosphorus. Potassium is very important for the translocation of sugars, root growth, and also your crop quality. Phosphorus promotes root formation, maturity, and seed production. So each one of your nutrients that are important here also have a really big effect on the plant itself. There are many ways to start your plants. As you can see on the left here, these are just some trays from some microwave dinners, and they hold the soil, and it's a great way to start your seeds. Anything, little trays that you can find to start your seeds in, especially for greens or other plants, you can get them started separately. In the center, you can also see where you can direct seed, just making little rows. In this case, we're growing greens for salads, bringing them in, and basically within 3 to 4 weeks, you will have your initial harvest. And for many of these, you can cut them and they will grow back. The other thing you can use are milk jugs, pop bottles, anything that will hold the soil, and start hanging them on the wall and going vertical. A lot of ways to do this and be very efficient with the use of your space. But starting the seeds is very important to make sure you have good control, good germination, and once they get established, you can also then put them in the ground. So you can grow a lot of plants in a small space to get ready for your garden.
Yeah, making spaces, small spaces.
Let us a little bit translate quickly.
Yes, of course.
Okay, so to translate, لنترجم شوي الشيء اللي انقال. So فيروشكا خبرتنا بالأول عن رزنامة شو نزرع وبأي وقت، والهدف إنه ما نخلي جنينة عنا إذا بدكم kind of ترتاح، يعني بالوقت اللي بنكون عم نزرع شيء بيكون في شيء تاني عم نحصده. فخبرتنا عن الرزنامة وقالت لنا إنه فينا نلاقي كتير قصص على جوجل على الإنترنت، بس it's always عطول كتير مهم إنه نحن نعمل الرزنامة تبعنا حسب بعدين الاكسبيرينس تبعنا ونعرف شو نحط مع شو. بعدين انتقلت على الكومبانيون بلانتينجز، يعني النباتات يلي بتعيش حد بعضها، شو بينزرع حد شو. مش دايما النباتات يلي من ذات العائله بينزرعوا مع بعض. فور اكزامبل البروكولي والملفوف والبراسل سبراوتس هن من ذات العائله، مش دايما لازم ينزرعوا حد بعض. فور اكزامبل عطونا اكزامبل انه الثوم والبصل بينزرعوا كثير مع البندوره، بيحمون، مش بس بيحمون، بيعطون طعمه احسن، بيساعدون كثير، بيحمون من بعض الحشرات والامراض. فعطتنا كثير دياجرامات حلوين لقصص تنزرع حد القصص الثانيه. بعدين دانيال كفى يخبرنا كيف بنبلش. اكيد بنبلش من البذر، فينا نستعمل حيلا تري عنا، حيلا شيء فينا لايك باد فينا نزرع فيه السيدز تبعنا ونبلش الجاردن تبعنا. اوكي، جو اهيد بليز.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take you to the making spaces. Small spaces can be incredibly productive gardens, often very neglected. These are actually pictures of my own backyard, except for the upper left one. I live in a relatively small townhouse garden where my family wanted to have an outdoor space with a lawn, a place for socializing, even a tiny outdoor kitchen in the back. And of course, I wanted to grow food. So going vertical on a fence or walls and raising the beds with good soil and then planting them intensely is a great way to have multiple functioning systems in a small space. And last year, I made the archway in the lower left corner where I can now even train pumpkins and beans, which usually take up loads of space. And now creating a beautiful little green pathway, but also giving me a new space for shade-loving crops beneath it as our garden is entirely south-facing. Here's my longest elevated bed in full swing. So there's strawberries, herbs, leafy greens, beans, zucchini, much more. Vertical gardens are an incredible efficient way of using space, especially when the structure is available and vine crops are desired. You can stack and layer as far as your imagination goes. Many of these crops are also seasonal, so packing them in tight in the season will allow them to grow, and as summer harvesting progresses, the others will get more sun and continue to produce. Some other vertical solutions that we love are, for instance, sunflowers, which are great for attracting pollinators. They provide nutritious seeds, both for snacks and oil, but can also function as a pole for runner beans or other climbers. And if you have a sunny south-facing wall, grow kiwis, passion fruit, grapes, all wonderful when fresh. You can juice them later in the season, and then in the end, you can dry the surplus for storage. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks. Did you want to take that, Mark, or should I keep going?
We will translate very quickly.
Okay.
تنقول انه فرجتنا صور من عند جنينتها لحد بيتها وعملت مثل هيك شيء كثير حلو يعني بعقده صور، وقالت انه حلو الواحد اوقات ياكل من اشياء زراعه ويكون عنده اصحابه وهيك، ورجعت خبرت انه ما حد في يعمل مثل اذا بدكم بلان اذا كان عنده اسباس صغير يستفيد منه. اهم شيء انه فيكم تتعرفوا على الشتل، شو تزرعوا موسمي وشو لا. فيكم اذا كان مطرح صغير تزرعوا طلوع، يعني تزرعوا اشياء بتعربش. ومثلا خبرت انه فيكم تزرعوا دوار الشمس لانه بعيط للبولينيترز وهيك. شو بعد اللي
قالت شيء كثير حلو. Veruschca, I like your garden and the way that you introduced it. قالت شيء كثير حلو دانيال قاله بالسيشنز اللي قبل، انه it's a place to socialize، يعني مطرح لحتى العالم تحكي مع بعضها، العالم تعيط لبعضها، فهي بتلتقى مع اصحابها بهالجنينه، بتلتقى مع عائلتها. فهيدي من الفاليوز والبيلرز الحلوين للبيرماكلتشر.
هلا انطوني بيقول عاده لقمتنا بتجمعنا، هون عندنا الجنينه تبعنا بتجمعنا. مزبوط؟
Yes, indeed.
Okay, so we continue, or you want to say something, Anthony?
I'm enjoying the conversation and learning. Unfortunately, I don't have a terrace at home, and probably I won't be planting anytime soon. But I'm learning, and I'm happy that we're teaching that to many people that always ask the same question: where do I start? What do I do? So now it's easy to start. You need to start somewhere, don't you? And thank you so much, Daniel, for that amazing picture of Beirut and Antilias, or Lebanon and Antilias. I really loved it. Adapting the presentation to Lebanon is a spot on. Thank you so much.
Anthony, how do we accurately translate لقمتنا بتجمعنا for our guests?
Our food unites us. So, or our meal unites us, or our bite unites us. It's sharing is caring, and together, all together, we can rebuild things united around one plate.
So what this translation, I asked Anthony to translate it because somehow what you said, Weruschca, in this channel, Anthony always said that our food unites us. So you just, if you want, took it a further step to our garden can do this, and it's a way to socialize. Thank you for this. If you want, we can continue. And just to let you know that we are starting to have questions. Eli is noting them, and we will ask you this in a while. So if you want to continue.
Okay. Thank you. I very much wanted to show you the example of the Devray family in Pasadena, California. They did start this, single parent with 4 little kids started this yard garden in 1985. Eventually, as the kids grew up and as they developed, as you can see from the notes here, they would grow 6,000 to 7,000 pounds of vegetables on 400 square meters. You can see the intense growing system that they have here. And they were doing relays, which is also a kind of rotation of plants, constantly planting, constantly growing and harvesting, selling to restaurants, selling to subscriptions of their people. They would have an income and they would also feed themselves in this space. They also had ducks, if you can imagine, chickens and a couple goats. And they were making their own compost, making much of their own soil, also getting the kitchen scraps from their customers, their clients, to add to the compost and recycling all of the vegetable matter to make their own soil once again. They used the chickens, they used the goats and the ducks for fertilizer and also to process unused materials. This family also used a lot of the material to make their own biodiesel. So their vehicle was also driven by the fuel made from the vegetables. Very amazing. But you can see all of the planting beds here and how much of that is used. And also, they don't give themselves a lot of space to walk around. Look at the paths. You know, there's basically maybe a foot between each one because growing the vegetables is more important than basically being able to just walk through or have tours or conversations that way. This is another example of their garden beds later on in years. You can see they've gone a little higher, more intense, a little bit more structure to it, but they've really actually gotten rid of more of the paths, brought in more soil, and are growing more plants in this area. It's very much a great place. So let's talk a little bit now about plans that help you all throughout the season. To begin your garden, you might want to start with something that you can harvest early. Get your garden going and get some experience understanding the soil and the growing process. And as soon as things start to emerge from the soil, start planting the long-term plants for a later harvest. So the first column here are things that grow rather quickly and are easily harvested. At the same time, you're planting things that are going to take the whole season or grow longer for that. You have to always remember to leave space for emerging plants. And some of these plants could even be used as ground cover. Things such as carrots, onions, where you can thin them out and you can actually eat the vegetables while you're making space for other ones to grow at the same time.
And this is my harvest from last week.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
These are pictures from Weruschca's garden harvest from last week.
Yes.
Actually, just part of it, because I know there was many more vegetables harvested from that space. So a lot of opportunity there. Just very quickly, I wanted to go through our keyhole garden again. I did this last week, and this doesn't have to be in a circle, but it shows you the pattern of growing your different vegetables. So we have things that grow quickly and things that need to get started. So we have radishes and carrots and chard. Those are the first things we plant. The radishes might take 2 or 3 weeks, depending how big you want them. The carrots, of course, will take longer, and the chard will growing, and you'll be pulling the chard as it grows along the season. Then you're going to be adding in the lettuce. You're pulling some of the radishes, you're filling the space with the lettuce that also grows very quickly. And this is like basically in phase 2. Then the radishes are gone. The lettuce is growing, the carrots are still there, and you're harvesting the lettuce as it grows up and gets older and is harvestable. And then you're making room for other things. Then the lettuce is gone and you bring in the cauliflower. The cauliflower was probably planted at the same time as the others. It's just that it took a lot longer to emerge and take up the space. So we have multiple vegetables in this tiny little, basically 3-meter space, 3 meters in diameter, maybe even smaller space that you're growing in. And you can see these are the relays or rotations of plants as they come through. Carrots are harvested, Great. Now we have room for the chard to keep going, the cauliflower to get bigger, and we're basically harvesting the rest of that.
Yeah, seed saving.
Let us translate a little bit before talking about seeds, because seeds are important. Can you, Daniel, put the slide about the 400 square meter garden? So, اوكي هلا ان شاء الله يكون انا عن جد استوعبتها، بس كثير حبيت الفكره. كان عم بخبر انه هيدي جنينه ما انتبهت البلد. In which country is this picture?
What's that? Sorry?
The picture now that you're showing is from which country?
This is in Pasadena, California.
Okay. So خبر عن منطقة بكاليفورنيا، ناس ب 400 متر مربع قدروا يعملوا، محطوطين ارقام على الشاشة، 3175 كيلو من كل شيء اذا بدكم محطوط بالصورة، 2000 بيضة، وقدروا يعملوا انكم $50,000. ما بعرف اذا بتزبط بلبنان، كثير صعبة. بس هالجنينة الصغيرة انه 400 متر طعمت 4 عيال، شغلة كثير حلوة، فرجونا كيف معمولة. انا كثير حبيت هالفكرة منها. وهذيك المرة إذا بتتذكروا دانيال خبرنا عن كيف عائلة واحدة وقت سألناه يعمل ديفينيشن للأكل، خبر إنه كيف عائلة واحدة بتقدر تعمل أكل ل 17 عائلة ثانية، وهذا شيء كثير حلو. هون كمان عم نشوف إكزامبل ثاني عنهم. اللي يكمل شو رجعوا حكيوا.
أوكي، بعدين دانيال فرجينا إكزامبل شو بنزرع، وبالوقت اللي ناطرين فيه الشيء اللي زرعناه شو بيكون طلع عنا بهالوقت. يعني دائما في هالفكرة إنه ما نرتاح in a good sense. يعني بالوقت اللي بنكون ناطرين شيء تنحصد شيء بيكون عم يطلع شيء ثاني. وفرجينا شوي الاكزامبل اللي فرجيه بالسيشنز اللي قبل سيركولر، قال انه ما ضروري يكون سيركولر، وفسر انه شو بنحط مع شو. يعني عطى اكزامبل بتخيل الملفوف والخس بذات الوقت، في شيء السايكل تبعه اقصر من سايكل. فدائما عندنا فكره انه نحن وناطرين شيء بنكون عم نقطف شيء ثاني.
هلا بس تنقول هيك على السريع تنرجع نقطوشهم، انه اول شيء نقول له ثانك يو لانتوني انه عم بخلينا نعمل هالمواضيع عنده على الشانل. ونرجع نقول انه هيدي سيريز من 4 سيشنز عن بيرماكلتشر، نحن هلا بالثالثه، الرابعه رح تكون على الفيرمي كومبوست اللي هو شيء كثير 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 مهم الترين الجاي. هلا عم نبلش نخلص الباوربوينت، بس بعدين رح يبقوا معنا ونسالهم شو ما بدكم اسئله، عم نأيد كل اسئلتكم. سو عم بيحضرنا هلا وعايز حيلا سؤال عن الزراعه، وخاصه اليوم عن توبيك اليوم، شو بدي بلش ازرع، شو بتعوز الجنينه، اشياء صغيره، بلشوا اكتبوا لنا اياهم، نحن عم نكتب كل اسئله. You can go ahead guys.
Okay, thank you. One of the things I forgot to mention, and you may have seen in the list, I also have 2,000 eggs and 75 pounds of honey coming out of this same system. So there's a lot of other things going on in the background at the same time. Here you go, Weruschca.
Yeah, seed saving. Seed sovereignty, reclaiming our indigenous seeds and the agrobiodiversity as commons and public good. Basically, our right to breed and exchange diverse open source seeds, which we can save and which are not patented, not genetically modified, or owned or controlled by emerging seed giants. This is probably one of the biggest actions we can undertake towards food sovereignty. So always keep the first and best of your crops, the pumpkins, the cucumbers, tomatoes, zucchini, etc. Let them grow nice and large for big plump seeds and save them for the next season. Let the most beautiful plant in your leafy crops continue to flower, and you'll also have seeds. You'll be building independence and creating an increasingly stronger genetical seed bank for your plot with your conditions. Storing can be done in almost anything as long as it's clean, dry, dark, and relatively cool. You can even add a little ash against fungi or a bay leaf against bacteria and in the containers or bags. And if available, effective microorganisms are great for prosperous germination. Next slide. The processing. Keeping in mind that we're looking for the highest nutritional values and with possible restrictions for storage, especially cooling, choose as many crops as possible that can be dried, fermented, salted, or preserved. You'll be surprised that this accounts for almost all species. The different processes also enhance different nutrients in the crop. So adding these variations will provide more diversity to your diet. And of course, it keeps it more exciting for the palate. Choosing native berries that are high in antioxidants or fruits that are high in fiber, like figs and tomatoes, all are very easily dried to preserve. Also, if you grow large numbers of cabbages, kales, and root vegetables, you have an option to ferment, which is an equally powerful nutritional dietary addition, and it has a very impressive shelf life. So try to make your crop choices as a community or neighborhood, so you're not all growing the same, but can scale up the diversity and the successes. Storage, equally important. Generally the same as seeds, clean, dry, dark, and moderately cool. But in addition, there are numerous experimental ways, understand or in the ground, that may extend the storage time for several months. Drying or freeze drying are also very attractive methods for berries, fruits, and herbs, and also some vegetables. Most important, what we say, always eat a rainbow. Each color in a crop variety stands for a different nutrient. So plant and eat all the colors available.
Give it to you, Mark.
اوكي سو حكيوا عن شيء كثير مهم ويلي هو عن البذر. ما بتتخيلوا قد ايه صرتوا اكثر واكثر عم تسالونا هالاسئله ونحن كثير مبسوطين فيكم. عم تسالونا عن الهيرلوم سيدز او عن البذر يلي انتم بتاصلوا وما بتكونوا انتم ديبندنت من الشركات الكثير كبيره. وخبرتنا عن الجي ام اوز، يعني عم بيكون في كثير عندكم البذور المعدله جينيا يلي بتخافوا منهم، فهن خبرونا كيف نحن فينا نعمل بذراتنا. من شتل اذا خليته بعد الشتول لنقول خسه، مثلا زارعين 20 30 خسه، بتتركوا خستين يزهروا والزهر تاعت بذر، وهول ما بكونوا تاكلون، وهيك كل سنه بتقدروا تزرعوا اكثر واكثر. وهون حكيت عن كلمه كثير مهمه، عاده نحن بنقول فود سيكيورتي، هي قالت فود سوفرنتي، يعني شغله كثير حلوه، يعني السياده تبعنا، يعني نحن نامن السياده تبعنا من الاكل. يعني تخيلوا قد ايه حلوه انه يكون عندنا كل واحد يعمل بذراته ويأصلهم كيف كانوا يعملوا جدودنا، وهيدا موضوع كثير طويل اللي نقدر نحكي هلا عنه. وبعدين دقت بالوتر الحساس تبع انتوني، فهو رح يكملنا عن البروسيسنج والستورج. انتوني.
مونه شغله كثير كبيره. بكل حلقاتنا بكل برمتنا بنقول يمكن المونه اخترعوها جدودنا بلبنان. المونه ملوك المونه، ملوك preserving, the kings of preserving food probably are Phoenicians and Lebanese thousands of years back. فاللبنانيه يلي بيعملوا مونه، يلي بيقدروا يعيشوا بالضيعه بلبنان اكثر من 6 اشهر بلا ما يروحوا على السوبر ماركت، بلا ما يعوزوا شيء من حدا. الكبيس، ان كان اللبنه، ان كانت المربيات، ان كان الكوسه المجففه، ان كانت اللحمه المجففه، ان كان الشنكليش، ان كان الكشك، ان كان 100 واكثر من الافكار، البطاطا اللي بيتركوها، الاشياء اللي بحطوها بالخل، الاشياء اللي بحطوها بمي وملح. فهول كلهم فيكم تحضروهم بالبيت. وبعتقد رجعنا على هاي الطبيعه ورجعنا على هذا الطريق ورجعنا على الضيعه. وكثير في ناس منا اليوم يلي كان عنده شقفه ارض حد البيت او بعدها حد البيت عم بيزرعها، عم بيهتم فيها، وما عم بفكر يبيع اكثر ما عم بفكر كيف يكون عنده فود سيكيورتي لحاله. So in English, I was saying that probably Lebanese are one of the pioneers in preserving food, and you have more than 100 plus ideas of how to preserve food, of which preserving meat, preserving legumes, preserving yogurt, preserving hundreds of things. And in the villages of Lebanon, at 2,000, 2,500 meters, families can stay up to 6 months without going to a grocery store, just in their home, closed doors. And yes, they will survive and they can survive, and they've been doing that. So everyone that has a piece of land next to home, start by thinking food security. How can I preserve food for me, for my family? And then later on, or later stage, probably think of how I wanna sell it. So that discussion is so amazing, and hoping that everyone that has just 1 square meter of land make use of it for him and for the country and for humanity.
Mm-hmm.
We will come and take a training with you about food preserving then.
Right.
Wow, I wish all my videos were in English. You would have seen amazing things. We're adding translation as much as we can. But imagine just from taking that from from keeping the essence of meat and eating meat 6 months after, preserved out of the fridge, to creating something that is yogurt based, milk based, and then eating it 6 months after and still has the same taste. And then imagine all the legumes, how they dry them out, and then you can just put them back in water and regain the same color, the same flavor, the same texture. Amazing things happen in the village of Lebanon, or we would learn a lot from our ancestors.
Beautiful.
لكن بس هيك تنختصر الفكره. هلا شفنا عيونه لانتوني كيف هيك صاروا عم بيبرقوا، يعني لما مثلا نحكي عن مونه. ولهلا حكينا رحنا من الجنينه على كيف نعمل بذراتنا، كيف نعمل مونه تبعنا لنحافظ على المأكولات تبعنا وهيك، وهلا رح يكملوا لنا. So guys, anything else?
One last one.
Yeah.
Keep in mind that this is a cycle, and now we are right back to the soil again. We went from compost, we went from soil in planting our seeds. We're collecting seeds, we're growing the plants, and keep in mind, everything is always happening. You might even say at the same time. We're always collecting seeds. We're planting and we're harvesting many things and putting them in storage. We're always making compost. So there are a lot of things that are happening in parallel as we work in our system. So in order to avoid waste, we collect at the best possible time, we harvest at the best possible time, and then we basically recycle anything that's not used right back into the ground, right back into compost and into the soil. And in that way, every year we can grow more food in the same space. Just like the Devray family in Pasadena, they each year were getting more food, up to 6,000, 7,000 pounds a year, but they had to build up their soils and their practices in order to do that. So you might have to start slow, but after a while, you can really build a lot of soil in a short amount of time in the cycle that is gardening. Thank you for that. I'd like to thank you from United Designers, Weruschca, and myself also for your time today in showing you these slides in this presentation.
Thank you. Daniel, you look so young in the other picture. So
good lighting.
I will translate quickly your last slide, and then we'll ask you directly the question, because we have around 10 questions so far. So you can divide between you and Weruschca which one is going to answer which question. So دانيال خبرنا عن شيء كثير مهم اللي هو التسبيخ، وقال انه بما انه نحن عم نزرع، عم بصير عندنا فضلات اكل، عم ننشف نباتات، عم بصير عندنا فضلات، وين ما كان في فضلات اكل بالتشحيب هالاشياء، فكتير مهم نعمل التسبيخ او الكومبوست. بالسلايد تبعه كان في اكثر من 5 ل 6 تكنيك تسبيخ، او حتى حكى عن الزبل. ما رح نفوت كتير بالتفاصيل لانه كل السيشن الجايه هي عن الفيرمي كومبوست، بس هنخلي كمان دانيال يخبرنا عن الاشياء الثانيين. وبتصور هذا الشيء كتير مهم للبنان، لانه نحن هلا عندنا كتير مشكل انه نامن كيماوي، فالكومبوست والتسبيخ والزبل بيكونوا بعقده. So we go for the first question, guys.
بس انا قال شيء حلو كثير عجبني، دائما بحب القصص اللي بيقولها outside the box. قال فكروا بسنة الجاي، يعني سنة الجاي نحن اوكي زرعنا واكلنا هالسنه، فكروا بسنة الجاي، ردوا على الارض اللي اخذتوه منا. سو هذا المبدا تبع البيرماكلتشر، تبع الاستدامه، تبع كل شيء عم نحكي عنه.
So Eli just praised you, Daniel, and we will translate later on what he just said. So
Thank you.
The first question, and I know that you will talk about compost next week, but many people are asking, because we're talking today about plant needs, basic plant needs, and you know that in general plants need nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. The question is, can compost and manure really give what plants need, or they are, if you want, poor in these nutrients?
Yeah. Actually, it is the soil life that provides the adequate nutrients for the plants. If you have all the minerals and nutrients in the soil that you need, but you don't have any soil life, it won't reach the plant. These are the communicators. These are the ones that deliver the nutrients to the plants. So if you nurture and create habitat and food for the soil life, your plant will never be in need of anything at all. You don't need to add externalities at all. Dan, do you want to add?
In the composting of our kitchen scraps and our food, the exact nutrients that our plants need are in those materials. They are what made up those materials. Also, by using tap roots and doing different kinds of root structures in our gardening, those long, deep tap roots also go down into the soil and bring up minerals that are down in there also. So, yeah, but it is exactly right what Weruschca was saying. It's the organisms in the soil that deliver the nutrients to the plants. And if you're using chemicals, you're basically killing that transportation system that delivers it to the plants.
Okay, so we will not translate this one, it's clear, so we can have more time because we only have 10 minutes remaining. So we will ask the second question, Eli.
Okay, so our question is from Rita Samaha, our friend from Canada. She said hello at first, and she asked how much time and effort it takes to look after your garden, especially for amateurs, people who don't have any previous experience.
I'll say for myself, depends on what you're growing, of course. I was growing a lot of salad greens and things for myself and for my diet, and maybe a couple hours a day. I could skip a day sometimes, but I really want to keep an eye on what my garden is doing. Many times the best place to put a garden is, like Weruschca has, is where you walk. If every day you're walking through your yard, going to the car or walking through, you will see what's going on in the garden, and you'll do a little bit here and there. I know many people that have very large garden spaces. My friend Kelsey, as an example, has, I think it was like a 1/4 hectare, and she only spends 3 or 4 days, hours a day, but she grows most all of the food for the families that she serves in that amount of time.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank
Another
you,
question?
Another question from Sarah. Sarah lives in London, so she's asking if she can grow purslane inside her apartment, considering the climate.
Yeah?
Go ahead, Weruschca.
Yes, you can. You can add, there's especially leafy greens and a lot of herbs and spices. And actually, I have friends, they do the peppers and the bell peppers and the zucchinis. They do everything in-house, because also in the Netherlands here, we have a lot of bad seasons. So yes, you can do a lot inside. It's just the quantities is going to make it a bit more difficult before you wind up in a jungle, but you can absolutely extend your season inside.
Weruschca, she asked about a specific plant. She asked about purslane.
Yes, the purslane. I don't believe that's a problem.
Yes, and check just to help also answering.
No, that's
Purslane is a cosmopolitan plant that grows almost everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's a very easy plant, but it's an annual, so you have to maybe put seeds each year, unless it flowered and gave seeds, and you can. It's very easy.
Absolutely, like all vegetables are annuals. Yes, you have to redo it every year.
Yes, another question.
Okay, thank you. So our next question from Basim. Basim is praising the presentation. We're receiving a lot of positive feedbacks. And Basim is asking, what should we take into consideration when growing vegetables? Already, I guess we answered this through the presentation.
I think we just talked about that for about an hour.
The main point
really,
in 1 minute.
Yeah, sunlight, soil and water and temperature.
And also, I think if you're a beginner, try to go for the fast rewards that are easily grown with little plagues and little pests, so that you can reward your efforts to start getting into that growing drive first. So don't make it too hard. Take the easy wins first and take it from there.
Okay, so I will ask another question and then Eli a question. So you talked about a slide where you showed, the plants that are similar, like cabbage, like Brussels sprouts, from a botanical perspective, Daniel, these are not only from the same family, these are the same plant, okay? So the same plant that, and if you want, through agriculture with time, we managed to domesticate this plant. So cabbage or Brussels sprouts are the same plant, but you said something not to be planted together. It wasn't so clear. Can you clarify it? It's not my question, it's a question. Yes.
The plants that are very closely related, or cultivars very related, are extracting the same nutrients, generally speaking. They might even be what we call heavy feeders of certain nutrients. And if you plant them all together or repeatedly, they will extract that specific nutrient, that group of nutrients, then will be missing from your soil because you keep planting the same thing over and over. So the best thing to do is to separate them out, put other plants in between in companion planting. And then, of course, after each season, you pull out those plants, you compost what's left, and you bring in more compost and mix it into the soil to replace the nutrients.
Okay, it's amazing, and I'm going to translate this. So لأقول بالعربي، وهيدي مش الكل بيعرفوها، إنه الملفوف والكرامب مثلا والشو بروسيل والأرنبيطة والكيل، تخيلوا انه هول منن زيت منن مختلفين، هول زيت النبته ذاتها الانسان اصلها. عم بقول دانيال انه هول النباتات ما لازم نزرعهم حد بعد، لانهم بياخذوا من الارض زيت الكيميكلز وراح يفقروا الارض مع الوقت بكيميكال معين. اذا بدكم تزرعوا هول لو حد بعضهم، جربوا حطوا معهم كومبانيون بلانتنج او النباتات اللي بحبوا المصاحبه سمينا هذيك المره، كرمال ما تاذوا الارض كثير. عم تزرعوها هول اسميهم هو هافي فيدرز، يعني بيقدروا ياكلوا كثير من نوع معدن معين، وهذه فكره جديده وحلوه كثير. Thank you Daniel for this. Another question.
Our next question is from Christina. Christina is a future engineer and our intern this year. I would like to say hello to our interns. And Christina is asking, what is the best way to store the seeds?
Yeah, I also wrote that in the slide. Dry, of course, dark, clean, whatever you put it in, whether it's jars or bags or whatever container, make sure it's clean. And then moderately cool. I myself, I challenge the seed saving ideas, because I just keep them quite warm, but they're dry, they're clean, and they're dark. And it goes very, very well. So it's quite easy. I think darkness and clean and dry is the most important.
So one last question, and then if Anthony wants to say something, and we're almost over.
Okay, our last question is about your biographies. It's a question we got from your biographies, and someone is asking, how does an ecosystem restoration camp work?
Wow, big one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Dan, you want to
ask them? Well, similar to what United Designers is, it is a cooperative. So the ecosystem restoration camps, they are physically developing the camps, the growing spaces all around the world. They're finding local people to help with that, and then they're bringing together the best minds in order to restore the ecology, but also grow the resources for the people in the camp and the local people around. So that's ecological restoration with also human support in the process.
Yeah, and a big driver are volunteers from all over the world. They travel as the so-called campers. They keep the system going, and while volunteering, they learn about the systems, and those learnings, they can bring them back home to their communities. That's why it's an incredible organization that we stand by. Daniel, actually, not a lot of people know that, but was one of the first designers of the very first camp in Spain. And I myself, together with the team later, joined also in that phase. So we very strongly support the initiatives of the ecosystem restoration camps. It's a great cause.
Thank you, guys. And we're looking forward for session number 4 with you, Daniel. Anthony, any last words?
Thank you. Very, very, very interesting. Thank you so much. Learning every single time, every single day, every single minute. Daniel, Weruschca, you're the best. We cannot wait for the 4th episode, which I personally like and enjoy. I've been looking into for the last couple of months. I hope everyone enjoyed it, and I hope everyone had a blast. We hope to see more plantations on terraces and rooftops. So see you next Monday.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
I will just ask Daniel for next week if we can talk more about composting, vermicomposting, and all the ways of composting, not just composting. ميرسي لكل عم يحضرونا. الجمعة الجاية رح نحكي عن التسبيخ بكل الطرق تبعه. Thank you.
Thank you.